So we ended our last video with this setup where we had this frame and we said we wanted to add a panel inside of here. But we talked about some of the challenges that were going to occur. So let's stop for a second from the programming side and let's visualize what we're going to do here. Here's my kind of image. One way to approach basic GUI programs is to imagine making a frame which is going to hold kind of your program. Your program is contained within the frame, all your buttons and such. But then we place a panel on the inside and everything is pasted to that panel. What that allows us to do is kind of do some switching and some other useful things a little later on. So the way I'm going to approach this is I have my J-frame here. I'm going to place the panel that I make, the J panel, inside this exposed area. So here's my J panel. So I've created a reference to a J panel here, and then down here I actually construct a J panel, and then I add my J panel to my frame. Now I have done something here, which is I set the size of it. So before adding the panel to the frame, I set the size. Now if I set the size as the frame width and height, though it looks okay here, it actually presents a bit of a problem. The width of the panel is 1,000, the height of the panel is 600. The width of the frame is 1,000, the height of the frame is 600. So the width of the frame goes from this top left corner here right to there. So that's 1,000. If I make my panel 1,000, and if my panel starts here, it's actually going to extend a little bit past my frame. The height of the frame is from here to here, so that's 600. If I make my panel 600, again, the panel starts here, so it's actually going to extend below the frame. I want my panel to fit snugly inside this exposed area. To do that, I use an insets object. An insets object is a really useful object, and it has 4 fields. It has bottom, left, right, and top, which are all integers. These will store the insets for a frame. So if I go back to my program here and run this, the top inset will be the thickness of this border, the left inset will be the thickness of this border, the bottom inset will be the thickness of this border, and the left inset will be the thickness of this border. So what that means, I have my insets object here. I can actually construct an insets object by accessing, I don't actually construct one, pardon me, as I use the get insets in the frame class, and that calculates the insets for that frame. And then here's my, I just printed some stuff to the console, and it tells you the top border is 38, the left is 9, the bottom is 9, and the right is 9. So when I construct my panel, what I'm going to do is I'm not just going to construct it with the width and height. I'm actually going to say frame.getWidth minus the left inset minus the right inset, the height minus the top inset minus the bottom inset. And that makes my panel now the perfect size to fit inside of here. You can see down on my console, the width and height, notice now, are not 1,000 by 600. It's really important that when you actually get the insets from the J-frame object, you do it after you've set it to true. If you do this before the object is visible, you actually will get values of 0 for your insets. So now I want to paint some things to my panel. I'm actually going to paint to my panel in a very specific way to help kind of avoid some technical challenges a little later. Now, some students have figured out that if I go panel.getGraphics, I can use the graphics object to actually then do all sorts of things, right? Because you use a component's graphics object to actually paint to it or draw something on the screen. Though this works, you run into all sorts of little technical problems if you try and paint to a panel in all sorts of different places. So I'm going to actually put all my painting in one location. So best practice at this stage is to always try and contain all your renderings inside what's called the paint method. And the paint method is a method that's located in the component class. And again, I can check that if I pop up my documentation and I go JPanel Java 8. There it is. And I scroll down here. Here's all the methods, constructors, methods, and I believe it's in the component. There should be here a paint method. Let's find it. Print, paint children, paint, there it is, paint. So this is a special method that deals with rendering. Now there's a bunch of them, but this is the main one we're interested in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to override this version of paint, and I'm going to make a special overridden version that only applies to this panel. To do this, I'm going to get rid of that semicolon. I'm going to open a brace, close a brace, and put a semicolon here. What this means is I can write any custom methods for this specific object inside of here. And if my custom method happens to be public void paint graphics G, a header which matches the exact same header as the components version of paint, I've actually overridden my paint method. So what I can do in here is I could go something like g.drawLine, and I'm going to draw line 0, 0, and I'm going to say panel.getWidth, panel.getHeight, and now if I run this, I get that line in there. Now the benefit of writing all your drawing inside the paint method is that the paint method is actually invoked at all sorts of times in the program that when we aren't necessarily aware. You never invoke the paint method directly. If you ever want to tell your program to run the paint method, you use a method called repaint, because there's some other housekeeping things that has to happen. But notice if I run this and I modify the size of this screen, what it's doing is it's constantly repainting the panel. So that's why this line actually follows this bottom left-hand corner. Because I'm drawing it using the width and height of the panel, it's constantly recalculating that position. Notice if we know that my panel width is 982 and my panel height is 553. So if instead of having the program use the get methods to calculate it, if I put 982 here and 553 here and I run this, it looks the same right now, but if I resize it, notice that line doesn't get resized. So it's really good habits to use your get methods if you're going to calculate something, even if you know it's going to be fixed. So for example, I might use this set resizable method in the frame class to stop the user from resizing the frame. I'm still going to use the get width, get height. It's just good habits to develop. So in our next video, we're going to add some buttons and possibly a timer to this. Have a great day.